What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster underscore guy on Twitter. Not fueled by nerd teas today because I am obviously on location outside of the normal habitat and I am on my vacation, but that doesn't mean that the CFL stops. The CFL stops for no one. Welcome to week 20 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2022 CFL season. So obviously this week's show is going to be quicker than normal as I'm filming it in my hotel room here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I feel super calm and relaxed and just ready to attack this week. Ready to attack week 20, just 2 weeks left in the CFL regular season. The show's going to look a little bit different this week because I just kind of approached it a little bit differently. Results from last week were all right. I was 7-5 across all of the picks last week, 2-2 straight up, 2-2 on the totals, but I did go 3-1 against the spread. So 7-5 last week has me 125-94 on the season, 47-26 straight up, 44-29 against the spread, and still 5 games under 500 on the totals, a little over 57%. But after last week, maybe we can start moving a little more in the right direction after treading water for the last couple of weeks. CFL Fantasy, kind of mediocre last week, only 74.8 points, headlined by Ottawa wide receiver Justin Hardy, who was my MVP from last week, 93 receiving yards on 8 catches for 17.3 points. Now, interestingly enough, I did actually gain a single point on the person in first place in the official Atlantic Schooners CFL Fantasy Football League, but I did drop down into 9th place overall. So the top of that pool really continuing to constrict as the season comes down to the wire. Now, my CFL fantasy lineup in week 20, I will actually push to the end of the episode. But the way we're going to look at the games this week is we're going to talk about the 4 games. We're going to talk about the 4 lines. I sat down this afternoon as I was waiting for my hotel room to be ready. And without looking at anything, I just thought to myself, what are my leans? How am I leaning this week? How do I think this week is going to go without doing any other research ahead of time? What I'm going to do is I'm going to give that to you first. And then we're going to talk about the games and talk about how my leans did change once I actually sat down and did a bit of research. So the 4 games that we're looking at for the slate here in week 20, Ottawa is in Hamilton taking on the Ticats. BC are traveling to Edmonton to take on an Elks team still looking for that first win at home for the first time since prior to the pandemic. Toronto is in Montreal taking on the Als, the first game of a home and home, and Calgary is in Saskatchewan taking on the Riders. Now, the Ottawa Hamilton game, the Ticats are favored by 5.5. BC and Edmonton. Edmonton are 7-point dogs at home. Toronto and Montreal. Montreal a marginal 1.5-point dog at home. Same deal for Saskatchewan, actually only plus 1.5 at home to Calgary. 3 of the 4 games have totals that are at 49.5 points, the one difference being Toronto and Montreal, which is at 47.5. So my leans for the week 20 games, before I did any of the research, looked like this. Hamilton money line, Ottawa plus the points with the plus 5.5 and under the 49.5. That's the Ottawa Hamilton game. Lions money line, Lions covering -7 and under 49.5 in the BC Edmonton game. Toronto money line, then obviously Argos -1.5 because why would you not? And over the 47.5 point total, the smallest total of the week. And then I had Calgary money line, Calgary -1.5 and over the 49.5 point total. Those were my leans before I sat down and did any reading into the games and rosters and practice reports and anything this week. Those were just my leans going in. Couple of things to shout out here before we actually get into talking about the games. There's a lot of conversation about this Nathan Rourke versus Zach Collaros debate in terms of CFL All-Star, the most outstanding player conversation, interestingly enough. So there's a lot of conversation about like Rourke v. Collaros. And I suppose in the wake of Zach Collaros signing his contract extension, I suppose that makes sense. Here's kind of how I fall on that. Nathan Rourke was a phenom this year. an absolute phenom. Him getting injured, one of the worst possible things that could have happened for the CFL this season, because he was garnering so much intrigue, so much attention, so much interest in just the incredible performances that he was putting up. So him getting injured sucked. Prior to that, he was on fire. He was torching every defense in the league. Zach Collaros has been a steady, super high performing presence for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers over multiple seasons. I know if you just want to look at this season in a vacuum, maybe in terms of the All-Star vote, you want to look at Nathan Rourke because obviously for the time that he was healthy, he was the All-Star. He was the All-Star of this league. But in terms of most outstanding player, I love Nathan Rourke, I really do. But you got to go with somebody that played almost the whole season or most of the season. In my opinion, you can't go Nathan Rourke over Zach Collaros in terms of most outstanding player. That's just the way I feel about it. I'm interested to hear what you might have to think about that. Also want to shout out Alex Singleton, former CFL linebacker Alex Singleton, nearly breaking multiple NFL tackle records on Monday Night Football, which was Denver against, oh my goodness, I forgot who they were playing. That's awful. But in the Denver game, he almost breaks multiple NFL tackle records. He had 21 combined tackles, 19 of them being solo, playing all 93 defensive snaps for the Broncos in that game. A massive performance for Alex Singleton. Just super cool that we used to be calling his number quite often in the CFL. I also want to give you an opportunity to make the call. You make the call. There's three teams that are in contention for this final playoff spot in the CFL this year. Obviously, it's Saskatchewan. Obviously, it's Hamilton. And still in the conversation are the Ottawa REDBLACKS. You make the call. Which of those remaining teams gets the final playoff spot when it's all said and done? Let me know in the comments below. You make the call. So even though I'm not sponsored by them today, as I don't have a cup of tea, I do want to take the opportunity to shout out my great friends and sponsors at NerdTees and Coffee Bean at nerdtees.ca. Now, if you go to nerdtees.ca, you know what you're going to find. You're going to find dozens and dozens of incredible loose leaf tea blends, and now dozens and dozens of incredible coffee blends as well. So if you're not a tea drinker, but you love yourself a nice cup of coffee, nerdtees.ca has some incredible options for you. You're going to want to go there and you're going to want to use my promo code, which is BWFinest. That is going to save you 15% at checkout. You're also going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $100. And you're going to get a great conversion rate on the US dollar if you are one of my American viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for supporting the CFL, by the way. Nerdtees.ca. That promo code is BWFinest. It's going to save you your 15%. You're going to get your free shipping. Find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it at NerdTees and Coffee Bean at nerdtees.ca. All right, here you go. You've got my leans. You know how I felt about the games before I sat down and did some research. Now let's talk about them a little bit. We'll start with Ottawa at Hamilton. The Ticats come into this game having won 2 straight and 3 of their last 4, playing some of their best football of the season heading into these very important last few games of the year. Both of these teams, like I mentioned, still mathematically alive for the playoff conversation, but obviously a lot has to happen for the REDBLACKS to be able to slide into that spot. Ottawa squandering a 24-point first half with just 2 field goals in the second half last week in a losing effort. Meanwhile, Hamilton on the defensive side, incredible performance against Jake Maier and the Stampeders, 3 interceptions off of Jake Maier, and Tim White going over 100 receiving yards for the 4th time in his last 7 games. So Tim White is absolutely on fire. For the REDBLACKS, they just can't get healthy either. You look at their practice reports, William Powell's still not practicing, Devontae Dedmon's not practicing, Patrick Levels on the defensive side isn't practicing, Jalen Acklin is limited. You just have to wonder what the offensive upside of this Ottawa REDBLACKS team can possibly be with all these players not available. Looking at the Lions and the Elks, now the Elks have lost 3 straight games, and they're not just losing these games, they're getting blown out. That's by a combined score of 101-52. The defense is caved in, the offense is not putting up the points, and you're not going to have Taylor Cornelius this week either. A Lions win in this game does lock up the West number 2 seed for them. Or if they lose, but Calgary also loses, BC is going to get that West number 2 spot, which guarantees them a home playoff game. For the Lions, James Butler last week went back up over 100 yards rushing, which was awesome to see for him. But they did allow on the defensive side 325 yards passing and 3 touchdowns to Drew Brown, the backup quarterback for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So their defense may be a question mark here heading into the latter part of the season and into the playoffs. Not the time where you want the defense to be struggling. Last week, the Elks were outscored 22-7 in the second half. Like I mentioned, no Taylor Cornelius for them either this week. Trey Ford is going to get the start in what is their final game of this season. We'll be interested to see what kind of a role Kyle Loxley plays in this offense as well. He's taken snaps under center this year. They've deployed him in the backfield. They've deployed him at wide receiver. Be really interesting to see how they use them here in their last game of the year. Toronto at Montreal. The Argos are winners of 2 straight games, and they've actually won 6 of their last 7. Their last 2 losses, both coming to the Calgary Stampeders. So they have not lost to a team not named Calgary since, I believe, week 10. It's been a long time since they've lost to anybody not named the Calgary Stampeders. Both of these teams are obviously in the playoffs, but the first slot, the first position in the East Division is still up for grabs here mathematically. Like I mentioned, this is the first of a home and home series in the last 2 weeks of the season. This obviously will determine who gets that number 1 seed in the East Division. Both of these teams came from behind last week. Toronto erasing a 16-6 deficit in the second half last week in Edmonton against the Elks. Meanwhile, Montreal erasing a 24-17 deficit in the second half last week in Ottawa. What may come as a deciding factor in this game, the Argos are on the tail end of back-to-back road games. They'll get to close the season at home, which is great, especially if they then get the bye week to host the East Final. But the fact that it is back-to-back road games this late in the season, you got to pay attention to it. And in terms of the Calgary-Saskatchewan game, the Riders are coming into this game off of their bye, losers of 6 of their last 7 games. Their last win coming all the way back in week number 12. It has been a very difficult stretch for the Riders here late in the season. For the Calgary Stampeders, they've got the detriment this week of the fact that BC plays first. It's BC and Calgary that are so close to each other for the West 2 and 3, but BC is going to play first. So depending on the results of BC's game, you may see Calgary look to rest some of their starters. I mean, they're kind of banged up, especially in the backfield, that very important backfield for the Stampeders. They're kind of banged up, and they may look to rest some of these. Like, they may not push Kadeem Carey to come back and play this week. They may not push Peyton Logan, who's also dealing with an injury, I believe an ankle. They may not push him to play this week if they know they don't have anything to play for because BC has already won and wrapped up that number 2 seed. Calgary did trail by as much as 21-10 last week, and they did allow the game-winning touchdown with just 22 seconds left. So a really bit of a roller coaster of a game for Calgary. Not a game that I thought they could afford to lose. Unfortunately for them, they did. It was a close game, but I mean, it was not a game that I felt Calgary could afford to lose, and maybe also not in the fashion that they did. Like I mentioned, Kadeem Carey is not practicing. Peyton Logan is not practicing. This may be a Dedrick Mills start in the backfield here. And Dedrick Mills has done some good things this season, but he's not Peyton Logan, and he's certainly not Kadeem Carey. So if it does come down to the third string back, that could make a difference here, especially in a game that Calgary, depending on what happens before them, may feel like they need to win. We may also see Jamal Morrow back for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. He is finally back to practicing in full with no limitations. All right, so there's the research. There's what I wanted to talk about in terms of these games. Obviously, I did more research than that, but try to keep the video a little shorter because we're doing it differently. Here are the picks for the Week 20 games in the CFL. Ottawa, like I said, is at Hamilton. I'm going to take the Ticats to win this game here, and where I had originally leaned on having the Red Blacks cover that plus 5.5, I don't think they will. Genuinely, I think Hamilton, this is Hamilton's, this opportunity feels like it shouldn't exist, and it wouldn't exist for them had Saskatchewan not gone on such a losing streak. but the opportunity does exist. I don't think Hamilton's going to squander it. So I'm going to take the Ticats to win, and I'm going to take the Ticats to cover the -5.5 against the spread. I think I will stick under on this one because of all those offensive weapons that are still missing for the Red Blacks. Let's go 27-17 for Hamilton. Ticats win, Ticats cover, and give me the under on the points. The Lions in Edmonton, I badly want to give the Elks this game. But I said it in the show last week. I was like, please don't put me in a position where I have to pick you next week when BC's in town. And I just can't do it, especially not with, playing a backup quarterback. They're going to play for pride, like I said in the episode last week. I just don't see it happening. So we're going to take the BC Lions to win here. I like the Lions to cover the -7 as well. I don't think this is a particularly close game. It may come down to that at the end, but we're going to take them to cover the -7. And I'm going to take the over on the points, even though it's not Taylor Cornelius there for Edmonton. I don't trust that defense, and BC's defense hasn't been looking great to me lately either. So let's take the over on that 49.5 points. We're going to go BC 30, Edmonton 21. Lions win, Lions cover. Give me the over on the points. Toronto at Montreal. Look, I originally had the Argos winning this game and covering the spread, and I think going over was my lean on that as well. Let's go back over there. It was my lean on the smallest total of the week. I just feel like keeping the East Division as interesting as humanly possible, and where they're having a back-to-back or home and home against each other here to end the season. Let's keep things interesting. I'm going to go with the Montreal Alouettes here at home. Look, Toronto's been better against East Division opponents. They absolutely have. But this comes down to do or die and the possibility for that bye week. It makes incredible players do incredible things. I think we might see that from Eugene Lewis this week. So we're going to take the Owls to win that game, and that obviously means we're going to take the Owls to cover the +1.5 against the spread. I'm going to stick with the over on the total here. It's such a beatable number in the CFL, 47.5. Let's go Montreal 27, Toronto 24. Owls win, Owls cover, and give me the over on the points. And then Calgary in Saskatchewan. Now, look, I think the conditions that happen ahead of this game will probably dictate what the Stampeders wind up doing. And I would expect Dedrick Mills is probably going to start at running back. And I wouldn't even be shocked to maybe see, if he's healthy, maybe see a Bo Levi Mitchell start here at quarterback as well. Jake Maier threw 3 interceptions last week. Maybe just give him a little extra time away to clear his head. I'm going to take the Riders here in the upset. Yes, they've been on a terrible losing streak. Would we say 6 of the last 7? But if they do win that, it has them keep pace and at least keep the possibility alive that they might get into the crossover. Sasky is in must win. They must win both of their remaining games. So I'm going to have them do that in this one. I think it's a winnable spot for them. We're going to take the Riders to win, and then obviously take the +1.5 on the Riders against the spread. I'm going to go with the under, actually, here for the points. I think you could have a number of offensive starters, like I say, maybe not play for Calgary. So I think this stays under. We're going to go under 49.5 points and go Saskatchewan 23, Calgary 21. So Riders win, Riders cover, and give me the under on the points. There you go, folks. Those are my picks for week 20 in the CFL. We'll go over them here with you one more time. Hamilton under. BC over. Montreal over. Saskatchewan under. Those are the picks for week 20. And my week 20 CFL fantasy roster is right in front of your eyes right now. So we're going to grab Dane Evans there, and we're going to stack him with Tim White. Like I mentioned, Tim White has been such a monster over the last little while. 4 of his last 7 games, over 100 yards receiving. Going to go Kevin Brown and Walter Fletcher at running back. Fletcher has really leaned into that pass-catching back role for the Alouettes, and it keeps his fantasy value relatively comfortable with his cost, because if he's going to catch 4 or 5 passes a game, That's a lot of his fantasy value right there just in catches. I'm going to go with Justin Hardy again at wide receiver. I don't think we'll see Jalen Acklin this week. Darvin Adams was a possibility here for me as well, but Hardy had a good week last week. Let's see him build on it this week. And I really like Tyson Philpott here. I did a tweet about the Philpott brothers kind of taking over the CFL. I think that is beginning. That's certainly happening now. I like Tyson Philpott's possibility here at a very, very reasonable cap hit. So, look, I think he can get into double digits pretty easily. I think that's a value play for me. That's my fantasy roster for week 20. That's the show for week 20. That's it for me. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. Not fueled this time by Nerd Tees, but I love my folks at Nerd Tees. You know that at nerdtees.ca. And yeah, I will enjoy the rest of my vacation, but I'll be thinking of y'all while I do it. We'll see you next week for the NFL show early next week, and then this CFL show right back here at this time next week for the final week of the regular season. Stay awesome, be awesome.